Yeah.
So just give me 1 second to make sure that it's not going to feed back, and then we'll get started.
All right, you want us to mute, or you'll mute us?
Yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll go. So welcome everyone. I think what we'll do is we'll assume that this is the group, and I will mute everybody and also anyone who comes on during. So we will have, I hope, a minimum of interruptions. I will make it so that everyone can unmute themselves. So if you have a question and you'd like to, I don't think interrupt maybe is the right word, but just sort of interject a question, please feel free to signal. You can wave at me, gesticulate wildly, send me something in the chat, or just unmute yourself and excuse yourself. All right, great. So without further ado, I'm very happy to welcome Yelena Lembersky from Arlington, I think it is. Yelena has written a book with her mother, like a drop of ink in a downpour, which is a wonderful book, which I really recommend. I had a chance over my vacation to read it, and so among the many things, oh, there it is, product placement, always winning questions. Here, really a beautiful book, and one of the greatest things about the book is the reality of two narrators who have distinct memories of the same basic events. One from the perspective of a kid, and one from the perspective of a mother, and so just that sort of dialogical sort of way of that the memoir proceeds is really interesting. All right, so we have Jerry's reminding me that we have a half an hour for the presentation, half an hour for the discussion. I think that Yelena and I had in mind that we would have it be a little bit more freeform than that, so feel free to interject with questions and observations along the way, because I think what we're going to really focus on. We're going to begin really with the question of culture, and specifically the idea of this sort of interaction between Ukrainian and Jewish culture, and the sort of sense that we've had for many American Jews, the sort of sense that in the current crisis, there's this sort of new idea that there's a connection, a strong connection between Jews and Ukrainians. But I think one of the things that Yelena brings up in some of her grandfather's experience is that this is not actually something that's new, and that this is something that has a history, and it's a history that's worth knowing about, and specifically in the cultural realm, because one of the ways that Putin and his forces are prosecuting their war in Ukraine is the utter destruction of culture. So with that as a little bit of a teaser, I think I'll turn it over to Yelena to talk a little bit about the prehistory of this connection between Jews and Ukrainians.
Yeah, so this is, thank you, Rabbi Jim. So what I wanted to share today is, people are quite surprised to see President Zelensky, a Jew who is now a face of new Ukrainian state, and it feels so unprecedented. But I can tell you that not only so, for the last 30 years, the Jews came to Ukraine and began to reconstruct Jewish life and participate in Ukrainian life. So the chief rabbi of Kiev is an Orthodox, is a Haredi Jew who grew up in in New York, in Brooklyn, who has family here in Wellesley. So Rabbi Yaakov Bleich has been in Kiev for now 35 years. I think he moved in '89 and was part of this revival of Jewish life. But this is also not new because in the 1920s, there was this tremendous creative, the burst of creativity in which Jewish artists, Jewish cultural leaders cooperated with Ukrainians in creating this new culture, art that was avant-garde, radically new, but also rooted in the respective traditions. So I don't want to talk in abstract, in abstract terms. So I have some slides I want to show you. And I have a lot of slides. We don't have to look at all of them, but we can see and discuss and see what happens. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so this is the photo of my grandfather, Felix Lembersky, and he was a young artist in the 1920s, just starting up of his career. He was born in Lublin. I don't know how many of you, perhaps many of you are from Poland. Your roots are from Poland or Ukraine, but I don't see all of you right now, so I can't really ask, but we can talk about this later. But he was born in Lublin, and at the beginning of World War I in 1914, his family became refugees, as I'm sure many of your families. But instead of moving to United States or Palestine, his family moved to Berdichev, to Ukraine, which is near Zhytomyr, in the western part of Ukraine. And in the 1917 and 1918, in 1917, Ukraine had formed its own independent states, Ukrainian Kiev Rada. And in 1918, Jews, the Soviets came and gave substantial freedoms to Jews and to Ukrainians. So, for example, in the so the Jews were allowed to leave the shtetl, Pale of Settlements. They were lifting of quotas on Jews entering the universities. And during that time, there were two major institutions that were formed. One is Jewish Kulturliga. Have anybody heard of Kulturliga? It was a Yiddish movement. It was secular movement that had that stretched from Ukraine, from Moscow to Argentina. So it had spots in Poland, in New York, in Israel, and Latin America. But in Kiev, it had a cultural. It was a cultural center, an artistic center. And I will show you some artwork that was created by, not by my grandfather, but by artists who were teaching in Kulturliga. So this is Mark Epstein. He was a founder of Kulturliga Art School, where my grandfather Felix Lamberski was a student. And this is one of his work. It's very cubist, avant-garde. And in the next slide, these are graphic works, illustrations by Mark Epstein. And one of the main ideas of his of Kulturliga art was to use Yiddish Hebrew letters as part of the image. So they're both text, both information, And I don't know if some of you can perhaps translate and interpret those letters. But they're also big organizing force.
Yelena?
Yes.
Yelena, is there a chance you could make the slides the full size of your screen to go to?
Let me do that. Yeah.
That'd be great. That way we can see them more clearly.
I see that the middle one, I can read where it says Allah lender, all the lands. So it must have had a sort of a socialist kind of thrust, or I'm not sure why, but.
Okay, slideshow. Okay, let me figure it out. Sorry. Slideshow from the beginning. Okay, can you see it?
Yeah,
okay.
Perfect.
Okay, but now I'm back at the beginning. Okay, so I'll raise it back.
So you'll need to.
Yeah, so this is my grandfather. This is the quote that he talks about Ukraine as an inspiration for his art. These are my 2 books. These are more books about his work. The Kulturliga, Mark Epstein, and this is, okay, so this is, can you repeat the translation again?
Yes, in the middle one, I'm not sure about those letters. It says Isakhar, I'm not sure, it could have been like business, but I'm not sure. But underneath it, it says Allah lender, all the lands.
All the lands.
Yes.
It says America. It says America, no?
America.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
But it's missing a letter. Oh, no, I see it. You're right. It does say America.
And the other one says Vereinigkeit.
Oh, very good. Yeah. So it's Allah lender. So it must just mean like United States.
Oh my gosh, this is so amazing. So
yeah, that's right. You're right, Harriet.
But the race looks funny.
Yes, I didn't catch it. You're right.
It looks
looks funny because it's got the Yud right inside it.
Yes.
Well, I think that probably has to do with Yiddish orthography. That
well, it's his,
funny thing.
I think it's his artistic, touch.
Artistic license.
Yeah.
Well, what are those? What is that line of? Is that a line of horses at the top? Do you think?
And at the top it says Rusland.
No, Russia. Right?
Above the, way above that.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Oh, we should have put more of those slides, Jim. This is so interesting. So I think you're probably right, because the so the Kulturliga movement was a socialist movement, right? Because this was part of Bund, right? They were secular and they were kind of reforming. They're working towards freeing Jews and supporting the workers, organizing the workers, and it makes sense. I suppose maybe the reference to Rusland, Russia, and United States, the idea that there is a unified front of Jews around the world, from Russia to United States. This and
so it would say alle Länder, all countries.
That's what it says, right? Yeah.
And Vereinigkeit means unified.
Yeah.
Unified. Yeah.
Right.
Well, now, what is that one at the? That's in the upper right. Rusland.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what Adina said and pointed out. That's right.
To Russia.
Yeah.
So I suppose, right? I suppose he must have seen. I wonder what it means, but he must have seen, as many Jews at that time, they saw Russia, the socialist Russia, as the leader, right, in these reforms that will bring freedom to the working people. And I think there was a lot of optimism during the 1920s among Jews that the Soviet, this new socialist government will bring sustained freedom to many minorities. There was this promise at the beginning in the 20s. And so the artists of Kulturliga were looking to create this new way of life, and new art would reflect this new social structure, but it would also be rooted. They saw it was important to root it in Jewish traditions, in Jewish people, culture, language, letter forms. So Mark Epstein was both an artist and a leader. He organized, he was one of the teachers at the school where Felix Lamberski studied in the late 20s. The second artist I want to show you is Isakhar Barubak. What I want to also tell you about Mark Epstein is that he was, he was born in 1899 and then he died in 1949, so at the age of 50, quite young. The school, Culture League School, was closed in 1930 when Stalin started to ramp up his control over the country and arts. And Mark Epstein died in utmost poverty. And whenever you see 1949, that was the start of anti-Semitic, post-war anti-Semitic campaign. So it's not clear whether he died on his own death or whether he was persecuted. So the second artist I want to show you is Isakhar Barubak. And he was born in Ukraine. And he died in Paris. So he decided to leave Russia and Ukraine. I believe he left in 1920s. So this painting is a big synagogue. And does this look big to you? So a lot of the synagogues in Ukraine and Eastern Europe were really unmarked homes. And often they would have stores on the first floor and the meeting house above.
Huh.
So in the background, you could see the little houses. And that's a big theme, these fences and houses and old Jews of the shtetl. That's a big theme in many of the Jewish artists of that time. And it also became, my grandfather returned to those images in the 1960s.
There's an echo of Mark Chagall there.
Yes, he's the biggest name. Yes. I don't have slides on this show, but I have them. Yeah. Very perceptive. Okay, another artist of Culture League had done a lot of illustrations for children books. So you could read.
It's charming. Look at that blue elephant. So cute.
What does it say?
Involved in the forest.
In the forest.
In the forest.
It doesn't look like much forest is there, though. There's
just two.
Maybe it meant the jungle.
It's probably a circus elephant. And what about the one on the right? Anybody? Well, maybe these letters just become images of, Soviet industrial.
No, it says something, but I don't know that.
The aleph is a saw, and
the aleph is the hammer, and the hammer, and the X.
And the nun seems to be a candle.
This here?
I think it starts with a chaf. I think the first letter is, person blowing the horn is meant to be a chaf. It's like chion there, and it's hard to read it.
Oh, so the noon is the candle, right? This is right here, and this one is.
I think it.
Factories.
It looks maybe is it maybe pioneers, because that's a pioneer.
That looks like a pioneer, absolutely. Yeah, it has.
Yeah, so a pay, yud.
Yeah.
Is that what it said?
I have very little Yiddish, but that's my best guess.
Yes, that could be it. I see it.
And then the bottom it says Bichel, which is a book. And here it says Meshlis Tois Darfer. Maybe we are closing the villages or something.
And there's a drum. It says Mashlis Ois Darfur.
Darfur is like villages. or small towns. A dorf is a small village.
Villages, yeah.
Yelena, do you have dates for these?
Do I have what?
Dates for these books.
No, I don't.
I'm just fascinated by, and this is one of the things that is, I think is so fascinating about Soviet Jewish history, is that this efflorescence of Soviet Yiddish, that there was this real encouragement on the part of the Soviet authorities for publication in Yiddish, specifically on socialist themes, and it was such an important part of the culture, and then all of a sudden it wasn't anymore.
No, absolutely.
And I wonder if that's why Barubak, left. If the timing was such that he was able to participate in this heavy duty Soviet Yiddish thing, and then that fell out of favor. And again, with this idea that the connection between culture and language, right, that you could try to make take the secular Jews and make them into socialists and Soviets, but you were never actually going to get rid of the Jewish part, and that became sort of intolerable in a Russian-dominated.
I was trying to see what that says at the top, and the last word seems to be archive.
It says Centrale Jiddische Bibliothek in Presse Archion. It means the Central Yiddish Library.
Yeah.
In print of the archives.
Very good. Right. Very good.
we could make the whole talk, next time. I have to tell you. So, okay, Jim. So first of all, I don't have precise dates for these images, although I could probably find them. But I know that they were done in the late 19-teens or 1920s, because after 1932, Jewish artists could no longer do avant-garde art. And all the artists, many artists were persecuted, many were sent to Gulag, many were executed. But I want to tell you on a good note is that so Kulturleague is not very well known, and it should be much better known, and there should be more exhibitions, but there has been several books and exhibitions done. This one was done, I think 15 or 20 years ago in Paris, and it's a big volume with many of these images. They were able to collect, bring together, and there are major artists like Els Lisitsky, Mark Chagall, who participated in Kulturleague, Rebeck and Nikriti, and many wonderful artists. And if we ever do this again, we could, because a lot of them had symbols and that made references to Jewish stories and letters, and it's very interesting. But what's also interesting, so that may be another, and there's another book by an Russian-Israeli researcher, Hillel Kazovsky, who for the last 35 years collected these images, collected many of this artwork, because this artwork was being destroyed, and he will just buy them or just take, people would give this images and prints, pages, books, just to save them. So he has several hundred pieces in Israel, in Jerusalem, of this precious artwork, and I think that helps to exhibit it and study it. So this is Kulturleague, and it's the school, the Kulturleague closed. Okay, this is another painting by Isakhar Barubak, and again the themes of the road and the small houses in the shtetl, in the village. This, I don't know, what does this look to you?
It's like a little burro, a donkey, highly loaded with maybe vegetables. What do you think? It seems to have a bag on the side of its back.
Kindling wood.
Kindling wood.
Oh, it's wood, kindling wood?
Yes,
Okay.
it could be. And is that a goat who's carrying the kindling wood? A child in rural countries would be sent to collect kindling because it was twigs and branches that had fallen off the trees. So this would be something you would send a little girl to do. But I think there's an animal that's carrying the kindling.
Yes.
What I see is kindling for her, because the vegetables would be in the family's yard if they had a yard, and there wouldn't be any reason to bring it unless you're taking it the other way. But that's my proposal, and it is definitely an animal.
Mm-hmm. And it looks like a. Anyone else? Sorry.
Looks like a little goat.
Looks like, I was thinking that is a goat or a donkey, right? But either of those animals would have some biblical references, right? Because the goat, the goat would have Rabbi Jim, right? The goat is not part of Haggadah.
Yeah, the goat would be part of a Haggadah. It would also be potentially, the symbol of some sort of an offering. Right, a donkey not so much, but
well, the Messiah is supposed to come on a donkey.
We've heard that story before.
We were promised.
So there is a lot. There is a lot to.
It's the victory of the humble.
So that's Isakhar Barubak, and so he was participating in Ukrainian Jewish avant-garde, but he became disillusioned and he moved to Europe. Either in the late teens or 1921, very early on. But the memory of his work continued in Ukraine, and I know that in the 1963, when my grandfather turned 50, for his birthday, his best friend gave him 3 reproductions of Rebeck's work. And I find almost direct references from some of Rebeck's images, graphic images, in some of the later of my grandfather's works. But my grandfather's work, you will see, it's very different. Okay. And the second part of this cooperation between Jewish avant-garde in Ukraine and Ukrainian avant-garde is the Kiev Art Institute. So in 1917, there was the new institution was formed, Kiev Art Institute. It changed names. You will find it under Ukrainian National Academy, Academy of Art, but it's the same institution. And this was so Ukrainian artists took part in it and taught there, and they were creating Ukrainian nationalist avant-garde that was also new, but also rooted in the Ukrainian traditions, right? The traditions, folk traditions of Ukrainians, in Ukrainian religious paintings. So this is a very interesting artist, Viktor Palmov. He was born in Russia. So as everything in that region, the lines are blurred. Is he Russian or is he Ukrainian? But he considered himself, I believe, a Ukrainian painter because he took part in that movement and taught at the Kiev Art Institute. So here is the the man. So what do we see here? Anyone? And anyone sees any similarities with the Kulturleague artists? Or differences?
Horseplow man.
Yeah.
Yep.
The
house
very
in the
vivid
bag.
colors compared to the picture that you just showed before.
Color is similar or different?
To me, they look similarly vivid.
Vivid color,
The
yeah.
paint, the paint, the colors. Kind of warm and lively. That's even more lively.
Mhm.
To me, it looks like
Yeah,
a.
I mean,
Go ahead, Barbara.
go ahead, Sherry. Go
I
ahead,
was gonna
Sherry.
say, it looks like an entirely different style to me. And I don't know, it just makes me think of Fiddler on the Roof. Although it's not a fiddler and it's not a roof, but it just has that same quality.
Yes, let's use it up. Oh, wait,
There's something in that green tree up
actual-
there.
Because I had, yes.
But it looks like it's a working animal and a working man. I don't know if it's a plow, a manual plow that he holds
Like
in
a
his
plow.
hand.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
Or use one of the Trader Joe's white vinegar to use it up.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's also, it seems very different from the other picture because, this is not an old Jew, sort of, standing next to the synagogue. This is a youngish man working. He and his horse dominate the picture, whereas in the other pictures, the landscape really dominates, and you kind of have to squint to figure out what kind of animal it is. So this does feel different to me.
That's very interesting. So this is more man-centric, whereas the other paintings were more letter-centric and more landscape. So that's actually very interesting because for the Jews, for many, many centuries, right, Jews were not allowed to represent human figure, right? So I wonder if maybe, so even I believe, Rabbi Jim, that is it either in 1800s or 1900s, the artists, the Jews were allowed by rabbis to show the images of men. But until then, Jews were prohibited from showing human beings because at the risk of, because people are created in the image of God, and so by representing a human figure, we are running a risk of some creating an image of God. So that had existed for many, many centuries, and either in 1700s or 1800s that was lifted. But I think that perhaps that some of these modern artists, Jewish artists, were still reluctant to give full focus to people, whereas Russians came from the opposite tradition of icons, right? Religious icons. So some of you talked, I think Anna Haya talked about vivid colors, and that probably comes from the religious icons, right? That had always very bright colors, focus on human figures. The red is always prominent in religious icons, as well as also in of course, it's also a Soviet Russia, socialist color of working class. And we also can't take for granted that these artists are creating these icons, if you will, of working people, right? Of peasants, of working people with their working animals, right? Some of these homes, and even the way the animals are drawn, the way people are, there is almost this kind of child quality to, like, naive art, right? And that stands in a very, very sharp contrast to the imperial art of Russia. And I wish I brought in the images of the imperial art. But if you Google art that was created during that time at the Imperial Academy in St. Petersburg in the 1900s and the 1800s, that would be a realism. It would not have this bright, saturated colors, flattened perspective.
Move my knee too quickly. And excuse me, excuse me, may I point out or ask about the figure of the horse is surrounded by a cloud-like film that changes the color of the village that we see, and actually, as it goes up toward the hill, it even seems to have a boundary between the real and the mythical. This looks absolutely as if, is there some, well, here's the question. Is there some Ukrainian tradition of some or myth about some magic horse, or because the horse seems to be in its own pictorial dimension overlaid on the village.
Mhm. It's almost as if the horse has, some kind of sainthood, right? This white almost creates a halo around it.
It definitely looks.
Mhm. That the whole image has this fairy quality, right? It's
They can't see me.
and there is a woman in the back that holds a yoke with a couple of barrels. That's almost like a shadow, right? She doesn't have the firm outlines. Everything is almost like a dream. It's very interesting. So the horse. It's very interesting that the horse is a recurrent. It's a very prominent image in Russian avant-garde painting. So there is a painter, Petrov Vodkin, who has this iconic image of the red horse. The horse fills the whole canvas, and there is a boy that's on it, and it's kind of, this was 1920s Soviet kind of almost coming of sainthood. In Christian iconography, right, the horse. Right, there isn't Saint George on a horse that kills the
Dragon, kills the dragon.
The dragon, yes.
So there is that, maybe that, and also Russian. I because I grew up in Russia, right? So the Russian fairy tales always have the horse as a prominent figure. There's a Konyok Gorbunok, the horse, the little horse that, like a hunchback horse, that acquires, that is no good for nothing and can't really do much in terms of labor, but turns out to be a magic, a powerful, that has magic powers, that can fly. And
would there be a horse myth that's Ukrainian? Because this horse, I mean, he really does seem to be appearing to the man is not astonished, but he is absolutely in a different, as I said, pictorial realm. The colors, the rendering is as if this is a vision or a visitation of a mythical or mystic being.
It's a very interesting question.
Wasn't the horse a feature of shtetl life? And don't we read about it in Shalom Aleichem and other?
Yeah, he has a special relation with his horse. He's always talking about his horses.
Yeah.
Almost as if they're friends, and he berates them and so forth.
Yeah.
They're not mythologized. They're not otherworldly creatures.
But they're somehow humanized.
Yeah, they're humanized, yes.
They're an important feature of shtetl life. But I agree with Harriet, they're not necessarily mythologized, right?
Well, I was interested in this image because I find many parallels between, the goat, right? In the Jewish images, and the white goat in the Jewish images, and the horse in Victor Palmo's paintings. But and another similarity that I find is that in the background, where is my mouse? in the background, there is the same repeated symbol, right? The fence, the little houses, the kind of the community that, obviously that they both, Ukrainians and Jews, shared the kind of built space that also became kind of stuff of the legends in this art. And so much of it was destroyed later in the 1930s and 40s during the war. And so this world may not exist anymore outside of these images. So shall we move to the next one? But what I wanted to say about this artist is there is this bit of information. So so what you will find is Palmov was one of those artists who worked at the Kiev Art Institute, but he also exhibited with Mark Epstein, and along with Mark Epstein and some other Jewish and Ukrainian artists, they organized the Union, Contemporary Ukrainian Artists Union, and participated in the exhibitions with some of the major Russian avant-garde artists as Vladimir Tatlin, who is best known as a Soviet Russian avant-garde artist and constructivist. So Palmov died at a very young age of barely 40, in 1929, and that was also the year, the circumstances are not known, but this was also the year when Stalin began to ramp up terror. Yeah. Okay, so shall we move? Yeah. Okay, this is another image by Palmov. And here is, so this is, we spoke about the horse. Now, I think to me, this is a goat, wouldn't you say? It's hard to tell.
I say
Hard to
horse.
tell. It could be either.
Could be either. Or a dog, I don't know. It's an animal world of some sort. But anybody has something to say about this? I think it's a beautiful image. It's one of my...
Birds, trees, animals, people.
Yeah. Almost, it's almost kind of on the border between child's naive drawings and the mythical world, right? To me, yeah. And the figures are very abstract here, so they're no longer, they're kind of blend in this dreamlike space. So this is anyone else?
They're like petroglyphs. They look like the kind of petroglyphs you'd see on rock walls.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
You see, the artist likes white and
light, right?
white. Yeah.
White and light.
I think that kind of has a question in Helene's theory about the white.
What was?
I think it has a mystical quality, mystical, that you can see through things.
Oh, spiritual, right? Spiritual,
Yeah.
kind of translucency, right? Transparency.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
At their
Very
many
surreal.
different levels.
So it's almost as he's showing spiritual world, right? It's not right. That's very interesting. During the 1920s, so artists like Malevich, Kazimir Malevich, another suprematist, Russian avant-garde suprematist, very well known here in the West. He believed that art was kind of a window into the other world.
Yeah. There are the windows in the. There are the windows in the picture.
And there are windows in the pictures, yeah.
Yeah.
On the one hand, the painterly part of it is diffuse and whitened. On the other hand, in my view, this painting has been constructed with its orthographic. Drafting tools have been used. straight. The lines are extremely straight, and they repeat in rather realistic foreground, middle ground, background, and then beyond that, something, a horizontal line that might be a bridge. The buildings are moving backward in as if in real time and in real forms, and the people are not, they're still representational, but they're obviously not real. I mean, they're not fully realized human figures. It's very curious to see that, and the combination brings forward. It's very dynamic. The dynamic of bringing forward the Red House almost into the viewer's space. That's what I see.
So almost the people are very static, right? They don't seem to be moving anywhere, but the houses are tipping over and they're almost moving. They're almost kind of, I don't know if they're dancing, but they form some kind of like a procession, right?
That's
from
right,
this
exactly.
house. Yeah, there is some in the background, and then this triangle keeps repeating itself and tipping over as if it's a movement.
And the horse is running.
The horse is running away.
It's coming forward to us.
It's a dog.
It's
a dog.
The dog, maybe, yeah. I see a dog. I have a dog, so I tend to see a dog everywhere. Yeah. But so this was the time, 1920s, where the Jews and Ukrainians were creating this shared, were representing their shared space, creating images, creating mythologies of this space, creating this new art that was rooted in their respective traditions. They're exhibiting together, creating new art institutions. And then Stalin comes. Let's see. Oh, there is more paintings by. There's so much to say. Yes, this is more of Palmov. Okay, so do we want to look at that in detail, or should I move forward?
I think you should move on a little.
Okay, let me move on. Okay, so then Stalin comes. Late 1920s, he begins a series of terrible policies. Nationalizing land, taking away private property, and he begins to persecute artists. And in 1932, there is a new order, the new law that prohibits all avant-garde art, and he also begins to persecute nationalist artists, and he enforces this new style that's called socialist realism, and it has to have realist form, and it is really socialist propaganda. And this is a couple of examples. So this is quintessentially Soviet painting by one of the major artists, socialist realist artist, Alexander Gerasimov. And here is Stalin walking with Voroshilov. Voroshilov was I think, general, one of the military men. And so they are enforcing the power, their joint military power, and of course, Kremlin. So Russia becomes a dominant Soviet Union with the center in Russia. And during that time, many of the Ukrainian nationalist artists are sent to Gulag, executed.
You wanted to start original vegetables, I can be here in 15 minutes and you don't want to give up. Like,
And the paintings, these are other painters by socialist realist painting. And so what these artists were required is to show this very happy, they're very beautiful images, and they show this utopian idea of happy Soviet life that did not exist. They show healthy, well-fed, rosy-cheeked farm women. They're, oops, where did they go? They're sinking in this wheat, and they're, feeling their bag, the abundance. And of course, this is created probably around the same time where Soviet Union is starving, Ukraine is suffering from Holodomor, which is a famine that took away several million people. So the lies are perpetuated by Soviet artists. So this is now I want to talk a little bit about my grandfather. I don't know how much time we have.
We can go over a little
bit more.
We have about 10 minutes. I don't know.
We have 10 minutes. Let me race through those slides. So he was. So he began his work in Kiev. He studied in Kultur League. He studied in Kiev Art Institute, and then he moved to Leningrad in 1935 to study at the Academy of Art. So he studied realist art as well as the avant-garde. I will just race through this. These are his works from the 1940s. These are portraits of wartime portraits of children. And you can see here that he is very capable of doing realist art. But in the 1950s and 60s, he chose to reconnect with the art that he had seen and created in Ukraine. This is not Berdichev, this is a mistake. So Felix Lembersky, 1960s. This is a painting he created in the 50s of the revolution. So Soviets wanted to show revolution as triumphant, heroic. He shows chaos, right? The broken horse carts, civilians, children, refugees on the move. These were paintings done in the late 50s. And do you remember those kind of flattened, bright, saturated colors of Palmov's paintings? So he does the same thing in the 50s, very different from socialist realism. The images of people who reminded him of his childhood neighbors. These are children. From this boy is my mother's friend in Leningrad. Okay, this is a portrait of my grandmother, and this is my mother from the 1950s. He is best known by the three paintings by Babi Yar. Babi Yar is not very well known. I remember seeing these paintings as a child, but in Russia, nobody discussed Jewish history and nobody discussed Holocaust. So there was no history in our schools. But when I asked my grandmother what Babi Yar was, she also did not tell me for very different reasons. I think she didn't want me to have these difficult memories. So he created three paintings. This is the first one on paper. This is his best known work. This is considered to be the earliest representation of Babi Yar. And I don't know if anyone knows what Babi Yar was, but I'll tell you. It was the site of it's the Holocaust site in near Kiev, where 33,000 Jews were killed in one day, and 70,000 people killed over the course of the Nazi occupation. The Soviets refused to put monument at the site, and even attempted to put a housing project right there. But it was stopped because the river flooded. So God must have been watching.
They didn't want to have any memory of Jews being victimized or anything else.
Do I have, or did he have? Do I have?
At Babi Yar.
His parents died in Berdichev during Nazi occupation. He lived through the siege of Leningrad. So he was in Leningrad when the war began. But his parents perished. And after he came back, after the Nazis were pushed out, he was looking for his parents, and he wrote to Soviet Red Cross. And the response he got was that they just vanished. So the Soviets refused to tell the survivors, the families, what had happened. That was part of the silencing of Holocaust. He tried to exhibit these paintings, and he was never allowed to exhibit them. So he and this whole generation of survivors lived with this tragedy in silence. And the only way to preserve memory was through painting.
Where are these paintings now?
So these paintings are my family. That's part of my memoir, the story. We had, after he died in 1970, his later work and these Babi Yars could not be exhibited. Guests would come into our home to see this work. And in the late 70s, my mother decided we will emigrate and bring the paintings out of Russia. She was successful. So the paintings, the short answer is that the paintings are in Massachusetts. And we have exhibited them in a number of exhibitions. They've been published. They were featured on National Public Radio, their podcast websites, and many, many other publications. If you have time to listen to some of my interviews that Rabbi Jim and Sherry sent, I talk about those paintings and the history of the collection. So we don't have time to discuss this painting in details. I'll just say this one was created in '52 during the worst year of Stalin's oppression. And it took a lot of courage to persist to paint on this topic. These are some of the details.
Do you know when Yevtushenko published his famous poem on Babi Yar?
Yevtushenko read his poem in '61. So this was about 10, 15 years after these paintings were created. And this was already, Yevtushenko read this when Khrushchev came to power during the thaw. So at that time, there was a door opened to speaking about Jewish history. There was a period of time under Stalin when publishing in Hebrew, in Yiddish, was forbidden. All the publication, so the language was erased, the culture, the history was erased. Even mourning, the grief was not allowed for Jews. But in the 60s, it started to thaw. There was a Yiddish language magazine that started called Sovjetische Heimland, and there were some opening up. So I want to leave you on, I want to move to more uplifting. So this is details. So he creates the symbols of his own symbols of Holocaust, the raised fist. It was important to him to show the protest of Jews, that they fought, even barehanded, but they fought against the Nazis. And the shovel becomes an important symbol. In his later work, this raised fist comes in his more abstracted paintings, right? They become rising from these buildings as chimneys. And the showels became a symbol in his later 1960s paintings. We could talk about this a lot, but we will not have time. A lot of symbolism here. This is my sketch over some of the imagery that's hidden.
Do you paint also?
Yeah, I have 2 degrees in art, but I'm an architect by
He shows such variety in his paintings, such variety, so many different styles and moods.
Yeah. So these are sketches of, and so the recurrent theme of the mouth shut, right? The inability to speak, closed mouth, and of course, the Nazi, the Jewish dress in the concentration camps. And I'll just trace through this. And then coming back to 1960s, so these images, right? Do you recognize the paintings from Palmov and Rebeck?
Yes.
So he brings this whole memory. This is his style. So when he's already in his 50s, he comes back, he returns to these memories of his childhood homes that no longer existed. And again, we talked about the white, right? The dreamlike qualities of these houses. And there is the little figure that looks like maybe the head of the goat, or there is some kind of I don't know what it means, this white kind of dreamlike translucent quality. But it definitely appears here. And for him, yellow also becomes what white was for Palmov, right? The yellow kind of dissolving in this light. So this is Berdichev, his drawing of Berdichev from 1930s, and this is the painting from 1960s. This is the drawing of his father in 1930s, and take a look at this shadow. Do you see something strange about it? So if you look carefully,
silhouette and hands like praying.
There is almost like a hand raised, Brian. Yeah. Anyone else?
In the face.
Yeah. Yeah. He doesn't. The shadow doesn't. It looks back at the father. It doesn't mimic him, right? It looks back.
It looks
It's
like
almost
more than one shadow too, more than one person.
Yeah, it's also very reminiscent of this black mass next to the barn in the other picture.
Yeah.
It looks
this
like,
one. Are you talking about this one?
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Could it be the painter's shadow?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I think so. I think I almost think of. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's almost, it has the mystical, almost Hasidic, right? The Hasidic quality of interpreting the shadow as a speaking shadow and the hidden imagery, hidden mysticism in his work. So this is the works from the 1960s, and we talked about the kind of humanized buildings, right, from Palmov's work. So this is Lembersky sketches. Can you see all three of them, or am I blocking? Can you see them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all four are there.
Yeah, well, I'm moving back and forth so I can see them.
So I think we should probably spiral to the end, Yelena. So last.
Yeah, this is it. This is it. This was an image of Chagall. So Lembersky creates crucifixion. This is the painting of crucifixion, right, from the 1960s. Chagall creates the crucifixion on 38, crucified Jew. And this is the last painting, the seamstress.
Oh,
and
wow,
one of his last ones. And yeah. So that's it. Stop share. Thank you for listening.
Can we just have maybe spend 2 more minutes or so, or 3, just have a little discussion here?
Yeah. Any? I was going to say any final questions or thoughts from people who are on the call.
Yeah, I was wondering if you can say anything about your father's discussing the influences that he had from Europe or wherever that influenced in his art.
Influences of my grandfather's from Europe.
Yes, or anywhere. Did you ever discuss that or learn about it?
I think that I always often hear people mentioning, well, Chagall comes up, and I think that's valid. People tend to mention French, expressionism, right? And post-impressionism. I mean, he was very open. He loved Rembrandt. So you will see a lot of influence of Rembrandt in his early realist paintings. You may find Cézanne, Matisse, Van Gogh in terms of color. But I think that it's very interesting. We also tend to see influence in what we know best, and these are the best, best name, well-known names. He, in his autobiography, he lists among his main influences avant-garde, and I think those avant-garde Soviet avant-garde painters were also part of the French school tradition. So I think it's really a shared space. He also loved Diego Rivera. So from the full range, he loved Italian film. So it's a very just broad cultural. So, but that's a very interesting question.
I just want to say that I found these paintings very moving, and as well as your memoir, which I found to be so beautifully written and very poignant, and so little. I mean, there are things that have come down, but so little of it has really come through in an actual picture of what life was like. We have some things, but this adds a big dimension to it. And I was wondering about how you came, in your memoir, it's only later that you come to to affiliate with Judaism and go back to your Jewish roots. And I just wondered if you could just tell us a little bit about that and what your journey has been since then.
I'll try to briefly.
It's a little question. You can do it on one foot.
It's a very important question. It's very important. So growing up, as you will read in this memoir, growing up, we had absolutely no knowledge or education of Judaism. It was not available. I mean, I feel that I'm so privileged living here in the United States that I could educate my children, that my both girls had their bat mitzvahs, but I could never take it for granted. Jewish culture, religion, language, history, Holocaust were completely erased in the Soviet Union.
Right.
We knew nothing. The only thing I knew that my grandmother went to synagogue to buy matzah for Passover, and that we had paintings called Babi Yar, but I didn't know what it meant. And I do write, I think in the memoir, my visit to synagogue during Simchat Torah, which was the major holiday for Soviet Jews, right? The return of Torah. And it was very ambivalent for me because it just was so, it's not anything I knew before to be in a synagogue. It was very confusing. And at the same time, I remember hearing Jewish Yiddish songs, and I felt such a strong, powerful connection that I couldn't explain logically. It is as if something was in me that was always there. And to this day, I cannot listen to Yiddish songs or even ritual liturgy. They would just bring tears irrationally for me. So, yeah, but I'm religious. My mother is religious. We've been attending synagogue for the last 35 years regularly.
I just wanted to join in thanking you for your presentation. Just had a couple of comments. First of all, one of the paintings of your father you showed us was a portrait he did of your mother. And I think you resemble her quite a bit in that portrait. I first thought it was a painting of you, but it was dated 1961 or something. And obviously you were
I look so great.
But it was a beautiful portrait and it looks very much like you. The second thing is I was in Kyiv in 1999 just for a few days, and I visited Babi Yar. only because I knew about it, having read about it. And it's in a big forest. I don't know if you've been there, you probably have. If you haven't, it's in a big forest. And if you didn't know what had happened, as you say, there weren't any monuments or things there. There's a lot of trees and leaves and things like that, but it was very moving just being there. And it's quite remarkable that your father may have been the first person to really depict it in the form of a painting or other work of art in an era when that was very difficult to do. So thank you for presenting that and the rest of your family history and the other artists that you told us about this evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken, this is very kind of you. Thank you. So we have over 500 paintings here in Massachusetts, and I'm always looking for opportunities to show, to exhibit it. These paintings they're part of the family, they're family members, and I hope one day we will find. My mother's dream was to organize a museum or create a museum for his work, and I don't know. I hope in some future I will have more clear vision where this painting should be. But our hope was that they would be somewhere where many people can be seen, can see them, as opposed to our home. So
I had a couple of thoughts in that regard. I don't know if you've talked to the YIVO Institute in New York. But they have a lot of works of various kinds involving pre-Holocaust Jewish life and things of that sort. And the other, for the Bobby R paintings, I wonder if the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. might have an interest.
Yeah.
Or the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York.
Jewish Heritage. We've reached out to them for exhibitions, and they did not express any interest. So not yet. I have to say that Yad Vashem was interested in these paintings, but I would like for them, if they go to a museum, I would like them to be on a permanent installation as opposed to be hidden away in the storage for another 60 years. Yeah. They've been in storage long enough.
I'd like to make a comment. In response to Sherry's question, you talked a little bit about your not knowing anything about Jewish culture and tradition and how you discovered that. But I think people need to know, I'd like to point out that your book, which you and your mother collaborated on, tells a very dramatic and beautifully written story of one family's struggle in trying to leave the Soviet Union and also trying to live in the Soviet Union as Jews. And I highly recommend that book because it tells a story that we haven't had the opportunity to hear tonight, and it does it in a very beautiful way.
Thank you, James. I should say that when I say I knew nothing compared to what my children know. They know, biblical stories. They read Parsha. They can recite their Haftorah and Torah. But in the 70s, my mother went to those classes, Hebrew classes. They were studying. They were not allowed. It was an underground classes. They were followed by KGB. It took tremendous courage to teach those classes, to take those classes, and it took tremendous, exceptional courage for American Jews to bring the books that we could study.
Yeah.
So as Howard was telling us at the beginning of the talk. So I'm very grateful to Howard and everyone who had helped Soviet Jews to have some exposure to our history. And it definitely put the foundation to my Judaism and others. It's 8:50 now.
Yeah, I think.
Yes, I think we should stop. But thank you so much, Yelena. This has been amazing. So grateful to you, and it's a tribute to how much material there was and how interesting it was that we never went past the 1960s. So it's okay. We'll and maybe it's better not to focus on what's happening today, because what's happening today is so distressing. And we, without the interval of history to buffer it a little bit. But
right.
So thank you to you, Yelena, and thanks to everyone who was here and participated, whether in talking or in the chat. Really, a very rich program today.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. You really, this was honestly, your participation. You were such a wonderful audience. It was one of my favorite presentations. I mean it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sherry, do we
That's
have a
very-
date for our next meeting?
Yes, we do. It's Rabbi Jim is going to talk to us about is Jewish humor kosher, and the date. And the date is what though, Jim Leppert?
July 31st.
July 31st. July 31st.
And I want to thank Rabbi Jim for helping us out tonight.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much, Yelena. This was fascinating. I didn't realize we were going to be talking so much about his art, but I just found it so touching and very interesting. And I recommend this book also, as Jim said. It was a very beautifully written and touching story. I really admire you for writing it. It's really fabulous. So thanks all.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Have
you.
a wonderful
Thank
evening,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Good night.
Howie.
Thank you very much.
Adina.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.